Okay, so let's get into this really fascinating opinion piece from Al Jazeera. It tells the story of a dramatic showdown, not between two countries, but between a president and a pope. And right away, it sets up this incredible contrast in leadership and power during the Trump presidency. The author, Andrew Mitrovica, really frames this whole thing around a huge contrast. On one side, he argues you had a lot of world leaders who chose to, appease the Trump administration. But on the other side, you had Pope Francis, who took a totally different route, a blunt, public, and just uncompromising stand. So Mitrovic's argument goes like this. For years, the strategy for many leaders was appeasement. The thinking was that, maybe soothing the president's ego was the only way to handle him. But the author contends that approach actually backfired. It only emboldened a leader who, in his view, thrives on what he sees as weakness. But this is where Pope Francis comes in. According to the author, he just completely rejected that entire strategy. He decided to confront what the article calls coercion and hate head-on, and that led to a very, very public critique. So while many leaders were apparently pretty hesitant to speak out, the Pope, well, he made his objections to the administration's actions against Iran crystal clear. He didn't mince words. He specifically called out the threat to the Iranian people and highlighted the suffering of innocent victims. And then the Pope took it a step further. He directly pushed back against any framing of the conflict as some kind of holy war. He totally rejected what the author calls the absurd notion that the God he serves heeds the hysterical call of warmongers. Just wow. And that led to this really direct plea. The author believes it was aimed squarely at both President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. He describes them as sharing a delusion of omnipotence and says the Pope urged them to stop the carnage and just choose dialogue over war. So you can imagine a message like that, it doesn't just go unnoticed. So how did the administration react to the Pope taking such a direct and public stand? Well, it wasn't with quiet diplomacy, let's just say that. According to the article, the whole confrontation then shifted behind closed doors, and the administration's response, well, it wasn't a debate about theology or ethics. It was reportedly a straight-up exercise in hard power. According to the source cited in the piece, the response was anything but diplomatic. It was basically a threat. A senior Pentagon official essentially told the Vatican's envoy that the church needed to get in line, reminding them of Washington's overwhelming military might. Okay, so here's the climax of the story. You have this immense pressure, a demand for loyalty backed by the threat of military might. The Pope's reply, according to the author, was the absolute defining moment of this whole encounter. The author presents the Pope's response here as a statement of just uncommon resolve. He simply refused to be intimidated. And this really highlights the clash of two different kinds of power, right? One is rooted in military might, the other in deep conviction. And the Pope made it clear he was not going to be silenced. And that's the thing. This exchange, the author argues, it was more than just a political disagreement. It really pulled back the curtain on a deep, clarifying divide between two totally different worldviews and two fundamentally different ideas of what strength even is. And to really drive this contrast home, the author points to an incident where President Trump reportedly posted and then deleted an image of himself as Christ. The article calls this a tawdry grasp at sanctity and sets it in complete opposition to the Pope's display of humility. So it all kind of boils down to this. The article frames the conflict this way. On one side, you have a president whose power, the author says, comes from missiles and the presidential seal, defined by bullying. And on the other, a pope whose power is rooted in moral clarity, principled and unbowed. It's a classic story of a bully meeting a principled opponent who just refuses to back down. And this is really the central question the article leaves us with. In a world of geopolitics and hard power, what actually happens when that power runs up against unwavering moral conviction? The author seems to suggest that maybe, just maybe, true strength isn't the ability to threaten, but that quiet resolve to stand firm, completely unafraid.